Well, welcome back to more on VR. We're going to talk about the prototypical VR system right off the bat here. Um, it's going to be a computer that generates and keeps track of virtual objects and renders new images as the user navigates through virtual environments. It's going to be output devices such as a head-mounted display with earphones, and it's going to have input devices or sensors such as data gloves that detect the actions of the user. So a piece of data sent to any of these will change everything in the system. So data has an effect. Okay. What kind of significant change are we talking about? Okay. Video games, image generation, displays, tracking, haptics, and tactile devices. These are all changes in what we have done to VR since we first started doing it. Okay? We created video games, image generation, displays, tracking, haptics, and we'll talk about tracking in more detail later on. Haptics and tactile devices have to do with feel, and of course we talked about augmented reality and how it also is involved in VR. Now, how do we talked about the diffusion of innovation, and we talked about how does technology get out? Well, let's talk about the diffusion here of this. Okay. Cost is an inhibiting factor. These labs that do VR cost a lot. This is a very expensive proposition. Now we have we have that. We can compare that to the is. We can say how much cooler it is and how much more fun it is. In the industrial world and in the business world, they're talking much more about other uses of the VR. We used Second Life back in the 1990s a lot. That was one of the first programs of virtual reality and education. Okay? A lot of people use virtual reality in an attempt to sort of live out their fantasies. And they create their own persona. They create their own people as they do this. The heart of the VR system, of course, is the fast computer that can generate really nice graphics. So it's crucial to the experience is the head-mounted display, the HMD, the head-mounted projection display, or the computer automated virtual environment. That's what the cave is. So this is crucial. This is the whole game when you're doing VR. You have to have good display. The display has not been a problem, although the people do work on display, do develop display, and they've developed it in various very cool ways. But the key is the what you're going to see or not see. Okay, the display. So we can use contact lenses, VR device. We could. Some people have experimented with that, and everybody I talk to that's tried this says it's really weird. I don't know how that works. Okay, let's talk about tracking now. This is kind of an interesting concept about how this gets a little bit into the technology, but I think it's interesting for you to know a little bit about it. Haptic tactile devices. These are devices that you can touch. Okay, that's what we're interested in there. Okay, so we created an experience through touch. That's what data gloves do, for example, and it requires a super fast computer. Okay, to create these. The uses are unlimited. They use this in health research, in military training, in prototyping, and to create realistic forces and feelings. Now, the keyboard, the mouse, the pull-down menus, buttons, these can all be devices, the interfaces. These can all be the interfaces that we use to actually get this done. We have a head-mounted display. We have the data glove. We have the data suit. We have artificial vision systems and motion tracking systems. We have direct neural interfaces, for example, sci-fi scenarios of brain jacks, of implants, etc., that you see on movies. So, for example, information is fed directly into the brain, stimulating the cerebral cortex centers, stimulating the cortex centers, which then the centers for touch and smell and taste and sight. In other words, all of your senses, because they're working on VR for all of your senses. Right now, we're talking about how they're perfecting touch, but they're also working on smell, taste, and of course, their sight and hearing have been the two that they've been using up until this point, which is the third guy coming in. And then we have smell and taste will eventually, so we get all 5 senses. So cyberspace and VR, which I mentioned cyberspace earlier, it's a medium that gives people the feeling they've been transported bodily from the ordinary physical world to worlds purely of imagination. The best idea of this, the best example of this is, on Star Trek, they were porting people around from the spaceship down to the planet. They used to do that all the time. But that's where the movie, it's obviously a sci-fi movie, a television show, but that's what the movie. Okay, film is used to show reality to an audience. Cyberspace is used to give a virtual body and a role to everyone in the audience. Print and radio tell, stage, film show, cyberspace embodies. That's what Randy Walser, he's wrote that in Mondo, which is a periodical, Mondo 2000 periodical for VR users. So the body then is the key in VR. Desktop VR, immobilized in front of a computer screen. The body that enters VR is a virtual body. It's not you. It's a facsimile of you, or it's a substitute for you. Sight and sound are the privileged, because those are the privileged senses. Those are the ones that we work on. They have worked on. They developed. Virtual world we enter is an impoverished sensorial experience. Okay, that's going from the desktop. Now, fully immersive VR, though, more fully immersed, more fully engaged in terms of sensual feedback, limited movement, but still constrained by technology. Still a virtual body, more senses are catered to, but this experience is still limited when compared to the rich sensorial environment of the real world. So we're not quite there yet. We're moving in the right direction, but we're not quite there. I throw this one in here, as this is one that always gets people to get a chuckle out of. This is the body in VR, used to enable physical bodily experiences and overcome the physical distance between participants. For example, in cybersex. Can't even say it. It's a interesting phenomenon to say, well, we're going to try to recreate physical bodily experiences from a distance, online, even in cybersex. Again, something else that the researchers and developers keep working on. So VR can be used to extend physical presence through telepresence systems. Remember, telepresence is having a presence at a distance. Okay, like when you take an online course, telepresence has to do with, do you feel like you're alone or are you with somebody else? Well, VR tries to narrow that gap so you can be at a distance but still feel like you're with somebody else. So these are some of the basic VR technologies, sort of to summarize what I've been talking about. Training military people in simulations, flight simulations, simulations, etc. Arts and entertainment, games, sports, entertainment, virtual museums, virtual actors, virtual travel, and of course virtual scenes that they create with VR and with the help now these days of AI. And then you have, of course, virtual product design, designing products virtually that you can actually. The woman that does the augmented reality clip I told you about, she actually talks about that as well. Okay, then you have telepresence applications. For example, this is what they can do with the VR. They can do bomb diffusing, remote operations in space, or the battlefield and in other dangerous or inaccessible locations. So it's really not just a game. It's not just for fun. It's real in terms of what we can use it for for better to society. So some of the important issues that face us here, that much is spent on anti-terrorist devices. Was VR labs can cost up to $30 million to create. It's a hot area for surgical training. Is the only limiting factor the user's imagination? Well, money may be a limiting factor, but the imagination is what makes this work. So finally, I just mentioned some of the positives and the negatives. We got to talk about both of these things. So positive side, on the left-hand side there, training, risk-free experience, experiencing things you wouldn't normally be able to experience, entertainment, fun, artistic, telepresence applications. On the negative side, we have to consider, people will confuse VR with reality. They would disengage with the real world. They will prefer VR to reality. It could be could be an addiction to playing around with VR. Psychological damage, identity problems that people might have, possible impacts on the real body. So we have a lot of problems there that we need to deal with. But we have the good, we have the bad, and we need to look at both of them. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I think we've covered what we need to cover. So we'll see you later.